Then she did a degree in medicine, and she's a GP. She has 4,500 people as her patients. And she wasn't happy just doing that. She wanted to know more about herbal medicine, so she did a postgrad diploma in herbalism with the most famous herbalist in all of Australia, who's become our friend, actually. His name is Dennis Stewart. He's on the radios in Australia, and he's probably one of the great herbalists of the world, actually, not just Australia. And then she did her grad cert in nutrition through Cornell University of New York. And under T. Colin Campbell, if you've ever read the China study, that was her lecturer, and that was her mentor there. So, and she's now doing at Bond University and some more studies in nutrition. So herbalism, nutrition, medicine, she's covered it all. So she's pretty well-rounded. She constantly studies. While the kids and I are mucking up and having fun, she's at home studying and getting more knowledge to help people, because she feels this burden that she needs to help as many people as she can in life. And that's why I'm very proud to be her husband, and I'd like to welcome her here to speak for us.
Okay, I feel like I have a lot to live up to now. I'm not that great, seriously. Now, just before I move on, I've put up on this slide here my website. On that website is all the notes from all my presentations. So if you go into the top part of the website, it has a little kind of 3 lines, which is like a menu. You follow that and go to health editorials, and it will have all of my notes in a handout form, which you can either print out or you can read, whichever you prefer. There are a few videos, but seeing as I am the one that actually put them on there and did them up, and I have no skills when it comes to video editing, they're not that great. So definitely use the notes instead of the videos to get the information. So don't feel like you need to take lots of notes. All of it's in there, and pretty much more detail at times than what I present today. So now, the first talk that we're going to do is actually about immunity. So we're going to look at some ways that we can naturally boost our immunity and fight infections. But before we do that, we're going to go backwards a little bit and just talk a bit about epidemiology here. So one of the great issues in health today is the rise of infectious diseases, and I'll show you why in a minute. We actually had thought we'd won this war on infectious bugs in the 20th century, and indeed we seem to have done a reasonable job for a time. However, in the last few decades, and well into this 21st century, the tide of infectious diseases are rising again. So in medical terms, we are moving from this age of chronic disease, which is things such as dementia and heart disease and diabetes, etc. And we're now going into this age of infectious disease. It does not mean that we have won the war on chronic disease, but now they are running concurrently. Both of them are a major issue. But what it does mean for us as clinicians is we're seeing infectious disease taking center stage again. But the problem is prevention and treatment options are very tenuous at best. So let's look at the epidemiology here. So currently, infectious diseases are the #1 killer of children worldwide. Previously unheard of infections are appearing more rapidly than any time in history. We've never had so many new diseases appear in such a short period of time, and that trend is continuing. It's prompted the medical historians to dub this as the age of emerging plagues. Now, examples, of course, include HIV, MERS, SARS, which included COVID-19, Lyme disease, hantavirus, dengue virus, Ebola, and Zika viruses, just to name a few. And just coming out of the last year's winter season, we had over 18 different viruses in my community that were going around. I've never seen so many at once. We're also seeing the re-emergence of diseases that we thought we had eradicated, even diseases such as tuberculosis, which I've had a few of those now, not personally, but in my practice, of course, cholera and whooping cough, all these sorts of things are rising again. And of course, we have lots of superbugs. They're increasing, they're becoming much more resistant to many or all of our antibiotics. So it is a very important thing that we're seeing happening. Now, there are a number of reasons why this phenomenon is occurring. We obviously are seeing a lot cheaper and faster national and international travel and trade, and this modern transportation or globalization is moving animals products around the world very rapidly. And that movement of people and goods is happening at a faster rate and a greater volume than at any other time in history. So that's one of the reasons why. Now, does anyone know what that place is? It's definitely not Millicent. And it's certainly not Adelaide. No, it's not New York. It's Tokyo. So, one of the biggest cities in the world. I think it might be the biggest, actually. So every country on this planet is becoming more and more urbanized. More than 1 billion people live in slums worldwide. And as the global population increases, the city is becoming more and more crowded as people are more likely to move into densely populated environments. Now, currently, more than half the world's population are city dwellers. That's 4.4 billion, or around about 3 out of 5 people, with that number expected to double in the next 20 years. So 100 years ago, by comparison, 1 in 5 were city dwellers, only about 20%. Now, slums and high-density cities are perfect breeding grounds for infectious diseases, and it makes it a lot more easy for those pathogens to spread very quickly. It makes a fantastic case, doesn't it, for moving out of those large cities into the less populated regions of the country. Closely linked to that, we have poverty. Remains pervasive throughout the world. Here are some current figures. The richest 1% own half the world's wealth. Just the top 81 billionaires have more wealth than 50% of the world combined. Interestingly, through the pandemic, 2/3 of the wealth gained were funneled straight into that top 1% of the world's richest. So, that disparity between the rich and the poor is growing. The poorest half of the world own less than 1% of the world's wealth. Now, nearly 10% of the world live in extreme and desperate poverty, but even in the developed world, more than 25% are struggling to make ends meet, and that is growing, even in Australia. So impoverished people tend to also have poorer nutrition, poorer access to medical care, shelter, adequate hygiene, and a host of other things that make it also more likely for the uncontrolled outbreak of infectious diseases to occur. It's a lovely picture, isn't it? It's a real picture. Alright, worldwide, agricultural industries have responded to the huge consumer pressure for lots of meat. All forms, dairy, eggs, it's all there. There is mass crowding, stressed, immune-deficient animals often filled with growth-promoting antibiotics and fed all sorts of waste products. More than 2/3, or about 70 billion animals are slaughtered each year, are farmed in factories such as this. They are the most deplorable conditions: mass crowding, poor hygiene, cruel treatment of animals. They've become an absolute reservoir for viruses and other pathogens to breed and rapidly mutate before passing on through humans. Now, bearing in mind, most, if not all, distinctive infectious diseases of civilization have been transferred to humans from animals. All the medical experts are predicting that this will be the most likely cause of a devastating pandemic at some point in the near future. And I'm just going to share a little example of one of the farming practices that happens in China. Thankfully, we don't have it here in Australia. But essentially, it's called multi-layer factory farming. So on the top layer, they have chickens in cages. Below that, we have pigs sitting in cages. And below them, we have a fish pond. So each of those are farmed for their meat, of course. So the waste products from the chickens are fed to the pigs, of course, because it's going through the crates, and the waste products from all that goes into the water for the fish. Now, if that isn't bad enough, those ponds are usually quite open, and you have wildlife coming in as well. And one of the main sources of influenza, the virus influenza, comes from wild ducks. That gets into the waters, and that water is then fed back to the chickens. The chickens pick up these viruses, and bird flu comes through us that way. So that's one of the examples of how efficient farming can lead to mass outbreaks of diseases. Only one of the examples, but kind of is another good case to avoid animal products as much as possible as well. Now, closely linked to these agricultural practices is mass deforestation. So in addition to all the devastating effects that this has on nature, it also brings us and farm animals into close contact with these displaced wildlife and all of the different pathogens that they carry, and this can lead to deadly diseases in humans and animals. Now, in an example of how this can occur, there was an event that occurred in the late 1990s when over 10 million acres of a forest in Borneo and Sumatra were burnt. There was a mass migration of bats, some of which of these nested in mango trees that were overlying a Malaysian mass pig farm. Now the bats dropped their urine and pieces of fruit and saliva into the pig pens, which contained a virus that was benign to the bat but very deadly to the pigs. Now, those sick pigs started to infect other farm animals and people, and so this was called a virus. It's called the Nipah virus. Now, with the transport of pigs to all other parts of the country, the virus started to spread. It was relatively quickly recognised, and within 7 months there was a mass slaughter of all pigs, and they were able to halt the virus in its track. The frightening part of the story, however, is that virus had a death rate of 40% if you got it. So 2 out of every 5 people that got that virus unfortunately died. So it was a very, very nasty one, but one of the examples of what happens with mass deforestation. Now finally, although not often recognised, is chronic disease. Now obviously, frequently this is found in a large portion of the Western world, but it does mean that chronic disease is that the immune system of many of these individuals is suboptimal and may make them much more prone to becoming ill and then spreading the infectious disease. So, the question is, we've all been through this, haven't we? We went through a pandemic, whatever you believe about that, that's up to you, but it came with a whole lot of difficulties and challenges, not with just our health, but also economically and socially. And that was obviously this COVID pandemic. The questions that are being asked now is, will this happen again? And if so, will it be more deadly? The prediction, like I said, from most experts, is that we are on the brink of a much more catastrophic infectious disease pandemic, most likely in the form of a very nasty influenza, but there's plenty of candidates out there. Now, we've all heard of plagues of biblical proportions, but students of the Bible are very aware of some prophecies from the Bible that gives us some insight into what is happening. So in the book of Luke, we find this amazing prophetic look at what this planet, Earth, will be experiencing in the time just before the return of Jesus. So I'm just going to quote to you here from Luke 21, verses 10 and 11. Now Jesus was asked what signs we should look to herald that his second coming was near. And Jesus replied to this question with this prophecy. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes in various places, and famines and pestilences. And there will be fearful sights and great signs from heaven. Now, all of these things we can see this happening before our very eyes. But in the midst of that prediction is the word pestilence, and that is another word for infectious disease. So we can expect that infectious disease will be a concern at this time in history. So, if another pandemic or a nasty outbreak of infectious disease is a possibility, the question is, what can we do? The answer is, first and foremost, boost your immune system. If your body is in a prime state without any inflammation and oxidative stress, your immune system will be able to fight and win a war against most infectious diseases that attack your immune system and all the different types of infections. And we're going to have a look at this and discover some of the many simple ways we can maximize your immune health naturally. The second thing is, don't be alarmed. We are expecting these things, but just be prepared. Now, always a great place to start when we're looking at boosting our immune system is looking at all the things in our lifestyle. What measures can we take to address this? And I'm going to particularly pay attention here to exercise. The reason I do that is because it's one of the most difficult things to instigate into our lives. So research actually tells us you can halve your risk of developing colds and flus by doing regular moderate exercise. You can halve it. Exercise has been shown to really impact the oxidative stress in your body body and boosts many of the innate, the inbuilt immune factors, making it 5 times stronger for fighting infections. To put that in other language, is 500% better at fighting infections. We also know that exercise will improve sleep, lowers stress and anxiety levels. All of these things are also implicated in your immune function. Now, how much is enough? There is nothing complex to this at all. Half an hour a day of something that will make you huff and puff. A brisk walk is enough to get that benefit. So we don't need any special kind of exercise. It's very simple. Half an hour of something that's making you huff and puff. Now you might like to try walking in the bush. There's a very fancy term for this. It's called forest bathing. But Australians, we've been doing this bushwalking forever, so I'm going to stick with the Aussie terminology here. But there is some amazing research behind this, and it's about some of the things that are found in the air when you go bushwalking. And I'll share with you a study that was done in Japan. So in Japan, they took a group of very, very stressed businessmen, and they sent them off for a little holiday in a forest, just to go for walks in the forest. It's very peaceful, very tranquil, and they were just to go for walks in the forest. Now, it wasn't a form of exercise. They weren't doing the huff and puff kind. They were literally going out into the forest for a walk. And what they did, they measured their immune cells before they did a blood test and looked at them, and then they measured them after they had done these walks. An amazing thing happened. Their immune cells went up massively high. I thought, that's very interesting. So it must be all about relaxing. So you know what? They retested this scenario, but this time they took another group of very stressed Japanese businessmen, and they sent them to like a health spa, but like more of a city dwelling type one. So they were just there to relax, have massages, sit around, enjoy themselves. They tested their immune cells before and then after. What do you think happened? Not much at all. There was maybe a little bit of an aid there, but very little happened. So they're scratching their heads and went, oh, it's not just about relaxing, there must be something there. So they went back to the forest and they took samples from the air and measured the aromatic compounds, which are essential oils. The essential oils that were in that forest. And then they took that and made a blend of essential oils to try a third round of experimentation. Now this time, they went and got a whole lot of very stressed medical students. I very much understand that concept. So they were very stressed, doing 48-hour shifts. They would come home at night and they would put their essential oils into a diffuser of some kind, and they would diffuse that overnight. They measured their immune cells before and after. What do you think they found? A massive rise in their immune function. It was amazing. They were still stressed. They were still doing their work. They hadn't gone on a holiday. They hadn't done anything to relax. The very opposite. These people were on the edge. But just by using that essential oil blend, they were able to achieve a very similar result. Obviously, there was other aspects to that experiment, looking at cortisol levels, all those sorts of things, that obviously didn't get the benefit there, but definitely to the immune system. So, here is a list of the oils that work on your immune system. Eucalyptus, cypress, pine, and fir. Now, we live in Australia. We have plentiful access to eucalyptus trees. I've noticed when I've been driving past a lot of South Australia, you have a lot of pine trees as well. I'm sure they won't mind if you go for a walk there every now and then. So you can diffuse these, obviously, as well as an essential oil blend at home. But it's not as good at reducing stress levels as walking in a forest of trees. Now, here's one little detail that's also important with this. You only have to do it once a week to get that benefit. That stays with you for the whole week. Is that achievable?
Yes.
Very achievable. Half an hour a day if something makes you huff and puff, and once a week go walk in amongst some tall trees such as eucalyptus and pine trees. It's not difficult, is it? Some of these things are very simply achieved. Right, let's talk about food. The best diet is the whole food, plant-based diet. Now, what do I mean by that? This is the food that's in the least processed form, and obviously all the plant food. So your fruits your vegetables, your nuts, your seeds, your greens, all of those are amazing. They all have wonderful properties in different ways, but research has shown just by increasing your fruit and vegetable intake alone has a significant beneficial effect on the immune system. But all of these things in their least processed form are rich in very anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, antiviral and immune boosting nutrients. Now there is also a very, very strong link between low-fat diets and enhanced immune response. So the whole food plant-based diet, by the way, is naturally low in fat. Conversely, diets high in animal products, saturated fats and processed foods tend to be pro-inflammatory and will depress the immune system. So again, it's very simple. Lots and lots of plants in their least processed form. You can cook them, but obviously don't extract all the nutrients out of them into a processed food. Now, there are some really amazing and helpful nutrients that we can find in this whole food plant-based diet that we do know are particularly useful to the immune system. So we're going to take a look at some of these. Now, vitamin C, very powerful antioxidant, well known for supporting immunity. It plays significant roles in both preventing and treating lots of respiratory tract infections, colds and flus, for example. Now, the recommended daily intake is about 100 to 200 milligrams per day for adults, as you cannot store this vitamin, so you do need to take a regular intake from your diet daily for vitamin C. And we've got some great sources naturally. So we've got a very much a superfood in Australia, the Kakadu plum, has 10 times more vitamin C than an orange, and obviously one of these plums will give you 5 times a daily recommended intake, but you don't need to go looking for those particularly. You have all your guavas, your sweet yellow capsicum or peppers, all of your citrus fruits, your black currants, strawberries and leafy greens are all fantastic sources of vitamin C. Now, if you were to supplement, I don't always particularly recommend this, but if you're obviously coming into a cold or flu, sometimes it helps to give yourself a bit of a boost. About 1 to 3,000 milligrams for most, or about 1 to 2,000 milligrams for most adults will help prevent and fight infections, and that should be more than adequate. Then we've got this one called N-acetylcysteine, or NAC for short. Now this is an antioxidant compound that shows some very powerful benefits, particularly with regard to influenza. That's the normal flu. So although it doesn't prevent you from getting the infection, the research shows that only 25% of those infected with the virus develop symptoms if they're taking NAC. That is compared to about 80% of those who develop symptoms when not taking. So it's definitely got some significant antiviral significance. We can quite easily get the precursor cysteine from our food, and that's in all the legumes and sunflower seeds. They're very good sources of that. If you were to supplement, particularly if you're going through a winter season and you're getting very prone to colds and flus, the supplement form is about 600 milligrams twice a day. I will caution though, if you're a highly allergenic person who suffer particularly from hives, asthma, hay fever, those sorts of things, it can potentially make those worse. And if you have stomach ulcers, you want to avoid this one as a supplement, but from its food source, perfectly safe to use. Now, zinc. This plays a very important role in the immune system. High levels of zinc inside our cells causes a decrease in the replication of RNA viruses. Remember, COVID-19 is an RNA virus, so it stops those viruses from replicating when you've got high levels of zinc in the cell. Now, really healthy zinc-containing foods include all of your whole grains, your oats, legumes and beans, cashews and almonds as well. Now, I will say be careful with supplementation. You don't want to take more than 40 milligrams a day if you're using it as a supplement, as it can interfere with the absorption of other nutrients, essential nutrients such as copper. So it's probably best to only supplement at times of higher risk when you're being exposed to a virus. Now, when you're very symptomatic with viral symptoms, you can very briefly push that zinc dose up to about 200 milligrams just for a short period, but it's not necessarily required. But I usually stick to around about that 40 milligrams. Then we have quercetin. Now, it has been implicated to have a plethora of benefits, including antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and anti-cancer, and antiviral properties, amongst a whole lot of other things. Now, with regard to its benefits as an antiviral, it works as what we call a zinc ionophore. Basically, it collates or binds the zinc and causes an inrush of that zinc into the cell, where it can carry out despite its antiviral actions. Remember, zinc stops the virus from replicating. Now, it's found very readily in red onions and carob, one of my favourites, cranberries, red delicious apples, watercress and asparagus, for example. If you were to supplement, you can use it at a dose of 500 milligrams twice a day. Then we have good old selenium, a mineral. Now it has a key role in strengthening immunity. It reduces oxidative stress and prevents viral infections. It also has some mild anti-clotting benefits as well. Now, it is found naturally very, very high in Brazil nuts. You do not need to supplement this one ever. Just 2 to 4 nuts per day will be more than ample for what you need to get with selenium. So even just a few times a week would be more than sufficient selenium for your needs. Then we have magnesium. It has multiple amazing effects in our bodies, but it does support our immune system, helps to reduce susceptibility to colds and flus, and it's very easy to get this one from your food. Again, you don't need to supplement. All your natural sources there include your leafy greens, your nuts, your seeds, your legumes, and your whole grains. Now, keeping a close eye on your weight and managing this is very important. So exercise and diet are the key factors for this. Being overweight or obese has a significant adverse effect on the function of your immune system, and it causes a state of chronic low-grade inflammation. So, when you have a healthy weight, you will decrease the inflammation, you will significantly improve the function of many aspects of the immune system, you will have fewer infections and less severe symptoms when you do become ill, and successfully managing your weight also reduces the risks and helps a number of chronic diseases such as hypertension or high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease and kidney disease, all of which have been associated with higher severity of disease and death rates with many infections, including both influenza and COVID-19. So we looked at all the important measures to include in our everyday lives, but there's a couple of things we need to avoid. These ones are again no-brainers: alcohol and smoking. Now, drinking alcohol every day or most days really suppresses and weakens your immune system. Those who consume alcohol are much more likely to catch colds, flus, and other viral or bacterial illnesses than those who don't drink. And the symptoms of the infections will also last longer and be more severe and intense when you are a drinker. We all know that smoking causes severe lung damage, heart disease and cancers, but it also has profoundly bad effects on your immune system. There are so many immunosuppressing chemicals, including nicotine, found in cigarettes. All of these cause smokers to be far more susceptible to both infections and also autoimmune diseases as well. Now, in the event that you get an infection, fever is actually your friend. Now, fever is there to enhance your innate immunity, the inbuilt immune system, and mobilize many of the factors in your immune system to fight the infections effectively. Elevated body temperatures will directly inhibit viral replication, particularly the influenza viruses. And the thermal effect of the fever on the body is associated with better survival rates and shorter duration of the disease caused by the infection. Generally speaking, there is actually no need to resort to paracetamol or ibuprofen unless the temperature is reaching close to 40 degrees Celsius. And there is obviously significant pain that is stopping you from getting adequate rest. Certainly when I was working in pediatrics, we would rarely treat a fever unless the child was sort of getting to 40 or over, then we would actually treat the fever. Lower than that, we would actually let it run because we knew the kids would get better a lot sooner. Let's look at water. 8 glasses a day are recommended, and research has shown that those who only drink 2 to 3 glasses of water increase their chances of flu, stuffy nose, cold, sore throat by 4 to 5 times, or in other words, 4 to 500% more, just by drinking as little as 2 to 3. So much better to get that 8 glasses of water in. We do know that viruses like dehydrated bodies, so it really is important to stay well hydrated. Now, sleep. Always a very difficult one for some of us, but a good night's sleep of 7 to 8 hours for most adults is really helpful. Studies have shown that in individuals who have been inoculated in the nose with a common cold, less likely to develop the symptoms if they have 7 or more hours of sleep when compared to sleep-deprived individuals who have less than 7 hours. So that seems to be the right number, about 7 to 8 hours. Interestingly, the hours before midnight are the best, so earlier in the night. This is when you have more of what we call a slow wave sleep, and this has the most immune-enhancing benefits. So sleep before midnight is much more important. Sunlight. So vitamin D, we receive that naturally from sunlight, and it plays a critical role in a number of things when it comes to infections. Vitamin D helps prevent respiratory tract infections. It reduces the antibiotic use. It enhances the immune system's response to infections. And an interesting statistic that I remember reading, through the COVID, about 96% of patients in ICU with severe COVID were vitamin D deficient, and that compared to about 40% of the rest of the population. So big difference between the severity of disease just with the vitamin D deficiency. Now the best way to get that is through your sunlight, of course. Now the question is, how much sunlight is enough? Well, everyone has a different skin colour. So here is your recipe. The amount that you need is in the direct sun for a quarter of the time it would take you to get sunburnt. So with your head, arms, and as much of your legs exposed as possible. So if you're like me, 10 minutes in the sun and I'm red. So I only need a couple of minutes a day. If you're like my daughter, who has the beautiful Portuguese skin, she takes about 2 hours. So she needs a good half an hour a day of sunlight to get adequate vitamin D. I will say though, being in South Australia, you're below the latitude of Sydney, so in the winter months, you may not get adequate vitamin D from the sunlight. It's at times like these that you probably need to get your vitamin D levels checked and potentially supplement if you're low in vitamin D. But generally speaking, through the spring, summer, autumn months, you should get plentiful vitamin D. And if you get a really good dose, that can tide you over the winter months, so you don't need a supplement. So if you're not sure, probably a good idea to get a blood test and get that checked. Now, ventilation. As you increase air exchange through ventilation, the infection rate and severity across individuals will decrease. In the 1918 influenza pandemic, a tent hospital, which was set up because there was no room left in the actual built hospitals, had lots of accidental ventilation and therefore had much better outcomes and survival rates than the crowded and poorly ventilated nearby hospitals. And that was in Boston. So we know ventilation has an amazing benefit. Ventilation is particularly important in your own home, perhaps even more important than sterilising all your surfaces. Ensure that you have good air exchange. Open your windows, allow the fresh air in, and this will help to prevent the spread of the viruses from airborne particles. Another way to ensure good ventilation is breathing through your nose. It is much better at humidifying the air that goes into your lungs, and viruses, generally speaking, do not like this humidity. And of course, we had this drilled into us, didn't we? Good hygiene. Now, despite the fact that many viruses and infectious diseases are spread via the air, about 80% are also transmitted by touch. Very few can get through the skin. So it's really important to avoid touching the places where it can get into your body in public places. So that's the nose, the eyes, and the mouth. So when you're out and about, try to avoid touching those parts because that's where the infectious diseases can get in. And finally, just make sure you sanitize your hands regularly and also the surfaces you have contact with. Now this is a whole talk in itself. I don't have time to go through all of that, but we know there is huge links between stress and immune function, with excessive and prolonged kinds of stress, severely impairing your immunity. So obviously if there's any issues there with stress or mental illness, these do need to be addressed with some professional help potentially. Now let's talk about hydrotherapy. Now, we just talked earlier about the importance of heat and how that heat of the fever can enhance that innate immune response. So there are some ways that we can actually help this along even when we don't have a fever, and that's by using hydrotherapy. So research has shown that even healthy individuals taking thermal baths between about 38 and 39 degrees Celsius were able to significantly stimulate a variety of immune cells and factors, just having a warm thermal bath. Interestingly, if this was followed by a short exposure to cold temperatures, it enhanced that immune system even further. So how can you implement this at home? Contrast shower. So what is that? 5 minutes hot, 1 minute cold, 3 minutes hot, 1 minute cold, and 3 minutes hot, 1 minute cold. Making sure the water is hot as you can tolerate, obviously not burning yourself, and on the coldest setting for the cold portion. Now you want to try and do this at least 2 to 3 times per week. I feel very sorry for you in South Australia. I don't know how you can manage this. I literally was so unprepared when I came here. I'm wearing like 4 layers. I don't think I'll be doing contrast showers down here anytime soon. But you guys are much more used to this, so perhaps it's okay for you guys to try contrast showers. Nonetheless, it's there. Just a little word of warning though, if you are particularly frail, have lots of chronic illness, elderly, have heart issues, please don't do contrast showers. This is not for you. You can, however, do a more simple version, and that's with a contrast foot bath. So having a foot bath that's quite warm, around about at 39 degrees, and then having a cold foot bath and putting your feet, or most of your feet and legs, into the lower part of your legs, into those buckets, alternatively with the same ratio, 5 minutes, 1 minute, 3 minutes, 1 minute, etc. So you can do the same thing, but just a simple version with basins of water at your feet. But this is my favourite form of hydrotherapy, an Epsom salt bath. Okay, so you do get the benefits, of course, being in a warm bath. It will improve your immune system, but also the Epsom salt is soothing to all those aches and pains that can come with a viral illness. Because Epsom salt is magnesium, so it does help with the immune system, helps with those aches and pains, and it does get absorbed across the skin. So this is a very wonderful form of hydrotherapy. I thoroughly recommend this as often as you can do. Okay. Always my favourite part. Let's have a look at some of those wonderful herbs that we can use to enhance our immune system. Now, astragalus. Here we use the root here. Now this is a very deep immune stimulator. It is a major leader of herbs for immunity. Now for those who are particularly scientifically minded, we know that it increases white blood cells, phagocytes, macrophages, IgG and IgM antibodies, and enhances natural killer cell activities. That's for the scientific minded. For the rest of us, it boosts your immune system. Now, it can also be used in the treatment of colds and flus. However, I tend to use this more as an immune booster for those who need to be preventing lots of colds and flus. So if you're very susceptible to colds and flus and tend to get a lot of things going around, this is a wonderful herb for you. It really does help to reduce the frequency and severity of viruses. Now we'll talk a bit more about this tomorrow, but in some parts of the world they do use this also to aid cancer treatments, and it can improve cancer survival time. And the dose is 2 to 6 grams of the dried root daily. And by the way, for all of the herbs that I give, I will be giving therapeutic doses. So there are lots of potions and lotions and pills and all sorts of things out there that give you all sorts of very tiny doses. They're unlikely to give you any benefit. So these are the beneficial doses. There's a dose response to these things. So that's why I give the doses. 2 to 6 grams of the dried root daily. Then we have andrographis. Now this is the part of the plant we use here is the aerial parts, the ones that go above ground. A very, very strong bitter herb, but we also know that it increases immune lymphocytes and natural killer cells and phagocyte activities. Again, immune booster. It's been shown to have broad spectrum antiviral activity against influenza, hepatitis, cold sores, wart viruses, HIV, and even SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19. So it does have particular antiviral activity there. And the dose there is 2 to 6 grams again of the dried above ground plant daily. Please don't ever use this one in pregnancy, it's not safe. Then we've got the good old-fashioned elderflower. Comes from the elderberry plant, but please don't eat the berries. They'll cause quite severe nausea and may even be toxic if you eat too many of those. You will not thank me if you go home and eat some berries from this plant. But it has been shown to directly inhibit the virus entry and replication in the immune system. It also enhances the efficiency of the immune response to the virus itself. It's particularly good at congestion, a lot of congestion from a cold or a flu, and coughs and respiratory tract infections. And it also makes a great throat gargle if you've got pharyngitis or tonsillitis. And here you want to use about 1 to 3 grams of the dried flowers daily. good old-fashioned echinacea, very, very extensively studied, particularly in Europe. Its most important action is to actually stimulate the innate immune system again in a number of ways, but it's more superficial than the astragalus, but it works more quickly. It has some very useful applications in colds and flus, a whole variety of respiratory tract infections, tonsillitis and pharyngitis, as both treatment and prevention. Also found to be quite useful in some skin infections, such as abscesses and boils as well. The dose there is at least 1 to 3 grams of the dried root daily. Now we can't go past the good old garlic. It's going to come up a lot in my talks. So this is an age-old culinary gold with some wonderful healing properties. It is very potent as an antiviral, antibacterial, antifungal. It also has some anti-parasite properties, but it doesn't harm any of the beneficial organisms in our gut. Acts on the bad stuff and feeds the good stuff. So most frequently used to treat colds, flus, bronchitis and nasal congestion. We also know that a diet rich in garlic reduces your risk of cancer. And the dose is 2 to 4 grams of dried garlic or 1 to 4 fresh cloves daily if you're having socially free periods of time. Now, here's the thing with garlic. When you crush it, chop it, mash it, whatever you need to do with garlic, when you're cooking with it, you quite rapidly lose its medicinal benefits. So a lot of those aromatic compounds are released into the air and you're losing that medicinal benefit. You can still use it as a culinary herb, it will make your food taste great. And if you're using bucket loads of it, you'll still get some of the medicinal benefit. But when it comes to using it to treat colds and flus, you need to use it either whole in your mouth where it's crushed there directly, and obviously you get all the medicinal benefits there. Or you can use it dried as long as it's dried below 60 degrees Celsius. If it's dried out above the 60 degrees, again, you lose a lot of those medicinal properties. So it's cool dried or fresh that you use it medicinally. Like I said, it doesn't matter how you want to use it. If you're using it for taste, do whatever you like to it. But if you're using it as a medicine, that's how you take it. Now, good old-fashioned thyme again, another garden favourite. You can use this in all sorts of cooking dishes, no problem here. Now, it is a great antiseptic with antiviral. In fact, it has at least 20 different antiviral compounds in it. Antibacterial and antifungal properties, probably one of the better ones to use with topical fungus infections. Now, very useful in respiratory tract infections, colds, flus, bronchitis, any sort of congestion in the respiratory tract. Particularly good when there's a lot of coughing involved. In fact, it's great to use as a gargle as well. So you literally can make a tea out of it, cool it down and use it as a throat gargle, and also for gum infections too. So it's great to gargle this one around your mouth. In the Portuguese culture, they have a soda. Yes? Yeah. Now that has a huge amount of garlic.
Yeah, sort of.
And thyme. So lots and lots of thyme in that dish. Now it is kind of like their version of our penicillin for them. They do have a lot of that in the colder months.
Yep.
If you can get my family has acquired the taste for it, so we tend to have a lot of it. Lots of thyme and garlic. It does get adulterated with other things, so we put tomato and all sorts of things in it. Okay. All right. Now the dose here, medicinally, we need about 2 to 3 grams per day of the dried leaf to get those benefits. I will just say a word of warning, don't ever consume thyme essential oil. Extremely toxic, and even as little as 1 ml will cause a fatal poisoning. So thyme should never ever be ingested as an essential oil, only as the whole leaf. Now Nigella seeds have had some decent research done on them. They are both antiviral and anti-inflammatory. They do help particularly with the immune response to COVID-19, and they can even help the lungs to heal afterwards, and it's shown to improve recovery time from milder COVID infections. And the dose here is actually 500 milligrams of the seed oil twice a day if you're going to use that one. Now, as a physician, I'd be rather remiss if I did not include the most important but often neglected aspect of our health, and that's our spirituality. So God is the greatest of all physicians. He's our creator. There is nothing in our physiology that he does not understand or know how to heal. But what we do know that even scientifically, having an active spiritual life has been shown to boost our immune system. I have no doubt I can understand why here. So, here's another prescription for you. Read your Bible every day and pray with your Creator and Restorer of your health every day. Now, just briefly, I always get questions about detoxing from spike proteins, either in the context of having COVID and having long COVID afterwards, or people who've had adverse reactions to the vaccination. So I will digress a little bit. Now, this information comes from the World Council of Health. This is an organisation that rose try to present transparent and balanced health information for the public. It does respect individual freedoms and choices. And so the information was compiled with a collaboration between lots of international doctors, scientists, and holistic health practitioners. And this was their top 10 spike protein detox. Now, if you need more details later, I'm happy to share the detail, but here is the essential part. So we're looking at getting enough vitamin D. Now, in terms of supplementing, they're saying about 5,000 international units daily. Vitamin C, they actually recommend 6 to 12 grams, that's 6,000 to 12,000 milligrams. Normally when you're hitting those sorts of doses, you get a lot of diarrhea, so I wouldn't recommend that for a long time. NAC, of course, N-acetylcysteine, about 600 milligrams twice a day. Ivermectin, that's not something that you can readily get here in Australia, so even though it's on the list, probably not the one that you'll be able to achieve here. Nigella seeds, usually this is in the form of a seed oil, like I said before, 500 milligrams a day, oil twice a day. Quercetin, 500 milligrams daily. Zinc, 40 milligrams a day. Magnesium, up to 350 milligrams a day. They've also recommended curcumin and milk thistle extract. So most of that I've already covered in this talk, there's just a few extras. But yeah, if you want more detail about that, just come and talk to me and I'm happy to pass that on. Now, the final point to consider is getting prepared for another possible pandemic or an outbreak of infectious diseases. Now, the recommendation is always to get about 2 to 3 weeks supply of over-the-counter simple stuff, medications, non-perishables and things, all that sort of information you can look up. But I'm actually going to prepare you for a natural remedy kit. The rest of it you can look for yourself, but this is my little natural medicine cabinet. Now, some of these we've already discussed, but there's a few additions I'm going to explain. Get some hydrolyte, so that's either in liquid, ice block, or dissolvable tablet form. So that's particularly for helping those infections where there's a lot of vomiting and diarrhea and you're losing electrolytes. Have some vitamin C tablets or powder at home. Get some zinc as well. Always immune boosting herbs to include garlic, thyme and echinacea. These things are all very easy to grow. They're not things that are difficult, so if you can't get a supplement form of them, feel free to grow these things in your garden. Now, another one that I haven't mentioned here, but it's a great one to have in your natural medicine cabinet, is white willow bark. Now, this is a tea that does help with fever, aches and pains, and it's a natural alternative to ibuprofen or aspirin. Now, it does, in fact, we used to get aspirin or derive aspirin from white willow bark. That's why it's so effective. It has that salicylic acid in it. Now, of course, because of that reason, you cannot use white willow bark in children, and you certainly can't use it if you have salicylate allergy. So that's the only cautions to using white willow bark. But it's a great natural alternative. It's fantastic on lower back pain, joint aches and pains. It's a lovely herb to use for that. The other one's marshmallow root or slippery elm powder. Marshmallow root's more not as expensive now, and slippery elm is getting harder and harder to get a good source of that. So marshmallow root is a great soother after you've had a gastrointestinal tract infection. And don't forget some eucalyptus essential oil. It's always good to have that on hand, put it into a diffuser. Or something that I just do when I'm coming down with a cold or a flu, which obviously is an occupational hazard in my profession, is that I just put some eucalyptus oil on a little rag and just put it beside my head at night. So rather than having to douse myself, it's on something else, but I'm getting the essential oils evaporated beside me. So, and it works wonders, keeps the sinuses open, obviously it's boosting my immune system. Another thing that you can do with this is you can make your own little, like a little balm, so to speak, and I literally just put a few drops in some olive oil. You can rub that on the chest or the back. You don't have to go and get any Vicks vapor rub or any of those things which often are made with mineral oils. You just literally use a bit of olive oil, a few drops of eucalyptus, and make your own. It works really well. And I will say too, all essential oils, try try to avoid using these in under 2-year-olds because it can cause them to hold their breath for too long. And of course, don't forget your Epsom salts. Wonderful way to have some hydrotherapy, nice and relaxing. So here's my final summary, my final prescription for you for a healthy immune system. Get your daily dose of exercise, half an hour of something that makes you huff and puff. Adopt a healthy, whole food, plant-based diet with lots of immune boosting properties. Keep an eye on your weight, drink plenty of fresh water, try and get those 8 glasses in. Make sure you try and get a good night's rest, going to bed as early as possible. Get your daily dose of sunlight, keep your home and workplace well ventilated. Practice good hygiene, especially in public venues. Manage your stress. Try and include those hydrotherapy contrast showers each week and Epsom salt baths for the aches and pains, or for those who are too cheap to do the contrast showers. Grow some garlic and thyme, and keep some elderflower and echinacea on hand as well. Foster your spirituality, always include God in your health plan, and just make some practical preparations for any future infectious disease outbreaks. Thank you very much.
If you were trying to take notes and you missed out on something, don't worry about it. I just typed Dr. Rachel's Health Hub. If you type drrachel.com, it will come up, or even drrachel.com, it will come up.
Otherwise we'll come up with
Yes. You put AU, because if you don't, you'll get a sexologist, a certified psychologist, and that is not Rachel. That's not her area of specialty. Okay, her area is a different area altogether. But if you type Dr. Rachel's Health Hub, you will get that, and I'll just do it here, just to show you how easy it is. Bingo! It comes up in blue, and there's 3 lines in the middle, and all you do is press those 3 lines. And you, over there you'll have health editorials. You press that, and there you are. You'll speak whatever subject you've spoken on is here. They're all there, and you click on the picture, and that will take you, and all your notes will be there. Okay, so Dr. Rachel Health Hub. Click on it, editorials, and you'll have all the information that she gave you today will be on there. Okay, so I hope that helps.